Show off.
This is Rogers TV, Grey County.
Five, four, three, two.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ross Kentner, and it's my honor to be your moderator this evening. On behalf of the Owen Sound and District Chamber of Commerce, I welcome those at the Bayshore Community Centre and those listening on CFOS tonight, and those of you viewing a delayed broadcast on Rogers Television. Some of the times will be tomorrow evening at 7 p.m., Thursday, May 17th at 4 p.m., Saturday, May 19th at 8 a.m., and Sunday, May 20th at 4 p.m. Also, Rogers has a link on their site to a website where you can stream this program as well. Having so recently retired from broadcasting, I hope you're going to permit me a brief word from our sponsor now. Your Chamber of Commerce has been organizing all candidate meetings, national, provincial, and local, for many years. The Chamber is the voice of your business community, which generates many of the jobs that put bread on our tables. The Chamber recognizes the important contributions of each level of government to our economic health and well-being. We have a very active advocacy committee which monitors local economic indicators and lobbies all levels of government on issues that affect business. The Chamber believes that one of the most important ballots you'll ever cast is in the upcoming provincial election on June 7th. In our democracy, each elector has a responsibility, and knowing anything about history, I would argue a sacred trust to exercise their franchise. And we want to do that on a fully informed, carefully considered basis. That's our purpose tonight, to get to know the candidates better and to hear them articulate their platforms. Before I introduce them, I want to quickly review the format of the meeting and the rules of engagement. In the first hour, the Chamber will ask its questions, and starting at 8 o'clock, audience questions will be put to the candidates. Anyone in the audience here at the Bayshore is invited to write a question. It will be collected and quickly reviewed by Chamber representatives to ensure that A, I'll be able to read it, B, that it's not X-rated, and C, that we don't ask the same question twice. In order to get as many questions answered as possible, to keep the meeting moving, and in fairness, there are time limits. 2 minutes for opening and closing statements, 90 seconds to respond to a question, and after someone does that, the other candidates each have 60 seconds for rebuttal. At the end of the evening, each candidate will have 2 minutes to wrap up, and we'll do that in reverse order to the opening statements. Our timekeeper tonight is Diane Austin, and when you see this sign, you have 10 seconds left to complete your response. I want to say, ladies and gentlemen, that we are indebted to all of the candidates for being here tonight, for the sacrifices they are willing to make in standing for election. Each of them deserves our respect, and the best way we can show it is to park our partisan feelings at the door and truly listen to what each of them has to say. Remember, this is not a political rally, it's an all-candidate meeting. It's not a popularity contest, it's about getting the information we need to make difficult but critical decisions. At an auction, the smart person sits on his hands. At an all-candidate meeting, the smart person sits on his hands, keeps his ears open and his mouth closed. Okay. And now I'm going to introduce the candidates to this date in the order in which they drew. So sitting immediately to my right is Karen Gventner, the New Democratic Party candidate. Karen has had a long association with the NDP and has been a federal candidate for the NDP as well. She works as a program assistant at the Grey Bruce Health Unit, as well as being a St. John Ambulance First Aid instructor. She's dedicated a lot of time to social justice issues and the environment. She's a volunteer harassment and discrimination advisor for OPSU. She's a member of the Bruce Peninsula Environment Group and volunteered at the Owen Sound People's Climate March. She lives with her family in South Bruce Peninsula. Karen Geventner. Next, Francesca Dobbin of the Liberal Party. Francesca has served as Executive Director of the United Way of Bruce-Grey for the past 13 years. She was part of a process that resulted in a number of changes to energy policy, including a moratorium on winter hydro disconnections. She now represents the residential consumer on the Market Renewal Project, a committee that advises the manager of Ontario's power system on reforms to the wholesale electricity market. And she helped found the Grey Bruce Children's Alliance and the Bruce-Grey Poverty Task Force. Next is Elizabeth Marshall of the Trillium Party. Elizabeth Marshall was nominated as the Trillium Party's candidate for Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound in June of last year. The Trillium Party presently has one member in the legislature. It believes that MPPs should be guided by their constituents and not by the party whip. She is the current Director of Research for the Ontario Landowners Association, Secretary for the Canadian Justice Review Board, and the author of numerous reports and a book on property rights. Elizabeth lives in eastern Grey County. Elizabeth Marshall. And seated next to her is Bill Walker of the Progressive Conservative Party. Bill is the sitting member of the Provincial Parliament for Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound. He was first elected in 2011 and re-elected in 2014. He is currently the Progressive Conservative critic for seniors, long-term care, and accessibility. He has also served as the critic for community and social services, long-term care and wellness, children and youth services, and as deputy health critic for rural and northern Ontario. Bill Walker. And in passing at this point, I'll just mention that I believe there will be two more candidates in our riding. Jay Miller of the Libertarian Party is out of the country at this time, and Janice Kaikoken is president of the Consensus Party of Ontario, and I believe that she may be running too, but I don't believe either of these people have filed their papers to date. So I think we're now ready to begin with questions. And the first question, these are chamber questions from the Advocacy Committee of the Chamber. And the first one? Opening statements. Oh, I beg your pardon. Opening statements, absolutely. So we begin with Karen and proceed to the right. So Karen.
Thank you. First, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the lands of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation and thank them for having us here. I'd like to talk about how things are right now. We have high hydro prices, high food prices. You go to fill up at the gas pump and the prices are going up. You go to the hospital and we have long wait times, partly because then we have long wait times to get into long-term care facilities. People are stuck in long-term care facilities because our home care system is broken. Our schools are under threat of being closed. The list goes on. There's many things that we need fixed in our area. On a positive note, we have an election, and you can vote for a party that is going to fix these problems. I'm going to present you with the NDP's plan that will make things better for all of us here. We're going to repair the healthcare system, fund hospitals adequately. We're going to fix the long-term care system, reduce hydro prices by buying back Hydro One, which the Auditor General said was a mistake, and it's shown that that is true. We would buy back Hydro One, it would pay for itself over 6 to 8 years, and it would lower our hydro rates by 30%. We are the only party that plans to pay for these by making the people at the very top end pay just a little bit more. So if someone makes $220,000 or more a year, they can afford to pay 1 or 2% more. The corporations, the big corporations, can afford to pay a little bit more so that all of us can have the services we need. We can have change for the better. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Francesca. As Ross stated, I've spent 13 years as the Executive Director of the United Way of Bruce Grey, and I'm currently on leave from that position. In that position, I also helped found the Bruce Grey Poverty Task Force, the Grey Bruce Children's Alliance, because I believe in bringing people together around a table to create collaborative solutions in our community. We also made a big fuss for quite a few years, 10 years, around these high hydro bills that everybody keeps talking about. We saw them in our office, we saw them on the streets, we heard about it on the phone. So I took the issue to Queen's Park and we got the change. It took 10 years to get the moratorium on winter disconnections in place, but it happened, and now your electricity will not get turned off from November 15th right to May 1st. That's enshrined now. We also managed to lower the hydro bills. We took things out of the system that brought the cost down. We took the social programs that were being funded on the hydro bills out of the hydro bills and put them where they belong in the social services budget. And that's the sustainable way of bringing down the hydro prices, is taking the costs out of the system. In addition to that, when we hear about things like, pay-as-you-go meters, and the first time I heard about that, I said, we're not doing that. Trust me, we're not doing that. And back in March, I was able to work with the Ontario Energy Board at one of the committee meetings that I sit on, and that was the end of that. And we shut that down real quick. So I've been your voice at Queen's Park. I've been your voice at the Ontario Energy Board and all the other provincial committees around the energy system to bring those prices down. But it's more than that. I'm more than just the energy file. I'm more than just the poverty file. I run a $1 million organization on an extremely tight budget as a charity, and I'm looking forward to getting back to work and bringing the prices down furthermore.
Hello, everybody. My name is Elizabeth Marshall, and I am the Trillium candidate for Ontario. The reason that I threw my name in the hat is because I too have gone to committee in regards to the Fair Hydro Plan, because the province is violating their own legislation. And it's systemic. And so it was my thought, and the Trillium Party thought, that if the government is not upholding its own laws, then that is anarchy. So we decided that because of the whip vote, it was too many votes, all of them voting the same. Now, some have said that, well, if you don't have whip votes, your government will collapse. That is wrong. All you have to do is look at the Northwest Territories. They have representative government, which means they're all independent. Those people are elected from themselves. They elect the premier, and the premier selects the ministers, and the rest of them move over to the opposition. It's very fair and very equitable. Whip votes are not working anymore. Too many times, too many parties vote the same, even though they are saying the complete opposite in the press. That is not the MPP's fault. They are told what to say, they are told what to do, and they are told how to vote. And as Steve Peters, the Speaker of the House in 2011, when he retired, stated that the MPPs in that House need to bring back the free vote for the backbenchers. It has not happened, and that is wrong. So this is why I am running. I have no illusions as to whether we will take government or not. We don't have enough candidates. So thank you.
Welcome, and thank you for being part of democracy. Being here tonight is the way that you are honoring the people that gave their lives so we could have free speech, freedom, in the great country we live in. I got involved in politics because I've been a community guy my whole life. I want to have a better province. I want to have a better life for my boys, Zach and Ben, who are here in the audience tonight. I've had the absolute privilege and honor to serve you for 6.5 years in Queen's Park, and I'm very concerned with where our province is going. We've got more debt, more challenges in front of us than we had when I started 6 years ago. I come from the little village of Hepworth. I'm one of 6 children. And at the end of the day, what I want is a Hepworth that's better, that's stronger, and I want the whole area to be even better. I care about our community. Whether it's out auctioneering for a charity, whether it's working for the Bruce Peninsula Health Services Foundation in the past, the Heart and Stroke Foundation, or Recreation Director, I believe we can have a better world if people step up to the plate and show their leadership. I'd like to congratulate all of my opponents for being here and putting their name forward, and all of the municipal politicians. There's an election coming in the fall. To every one of you, thank you for stepping up as well. To the media, for allowing us free speech, and for you making sure the news is out there in front of all of us. And most importantly, to the volunteer teams we have, we can't do this job without you, and we certainly can't do it without our family, who truly make the ultimate sacrifice, because every day that I'm not home doing my job, I'm not with them doing my job there. So thank you to all of you. I pledge to you that I will continue to be the hardest worker in Queen's Park like I have for the last 6.5 years. I show up for work, I am there to do the job, and I can guarantee you that I will earn your trust, continue to earn your trust, and I will be the person who actually puts Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound first and foremost, but I'll also look big picture on the province. We have a looming concern ahead of us. The debt levels are at record levels. The services are going to be cut at the end of the day if we continue to put more and more debt on. We're spending $1 billion a month. That's not sustainable. We need to do better. We will do it better. I look forward to the future. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates, and my apology for missing your important opening remarks. And there will be concluding remarks, too, at the end of our evening. I want to remind people in the audience here tonight at the Bayshore Community Centre to write your questions and then give them to Peter Reeser or other members of the Chamber, who will make sure that they make their way to this basket on my table. And starting at 8 o'clock tonight, we'll be asking those questions. But right now, we're going to ask some questions that the Chamber has formulated. And I think we're going to ask most of these questions of everyone, so you'll all have 90 seconds to respond to this. And our first question is, do you agree that Ontario needs a meaningful plan to tackle our debt and move towards balanced or even surplus budgets? And if you agree with that, how would you do it? And if you don't agree, tell us why. And we'll start with Karen Ventner.
Thank you. The NDP across the country has balanced the most budgets of any government. So yes, we do believe it is important to strive for a balanced budget. In our platform, we don't balance the budget. There is a slight deficit in each year with the goal that we will get there. However, unfortunately, for the past 20 years, our province has been driven into the ground. So if your roof is leaking, you need to invest to pay for that new roof. Once that roof's fixed, you can start looking at paying off that debt and making sure that your house is a good house to live in. And that's what we're doing, is we're going to fix the problems and then balance the budget from there. And the way we're going to pay for things, as I said in my opening remarks, is by having the top income earners, the big corporations, pay just a little bit more. We have the lowest tax rates for the big corporations in Ontario now, and we don't have to have the rock bottom taxes. They can be a little bit higher. We can make our hydro lower by buying back Hydro One. That will keep the corporations here. Lower tax rates have not kept them here. They're leaving, but we can keep them here with lower hydro rates. Thank you.
Absolutely. We need to get to balanced budgets. We need the surplus, which will then help pay down the debt. But we can't do it on the back of the vulnerable. We have to make sure that we don't cut services for our seniors, that we don't cut services for people that are disabled. The Ontario economy is booming. We have the lowest employment rate ever, and especially locally, our employment rate is even lower than the provincial average at this time. But unfortunately, there are people who are not benefiting from this booming economy, and this is not the time to cut the services to those people. The time is to invest in people and work to a stronger economy so everybody benefits. Thank you.
Having just finished reading the Auditor General's report and the Financial Accountabilities report, there is so much waste in government that it is quite viable to actually start working towards, A, getting rid of the debt and balancing the budget. Our belief in the Trillium Party is that we should be working with the Auditor General instead of against the Auditor General, and we should also be working with the Financial Accountability Officer as well. They are the experts in their field, and they are completely nonpartisan. I have a lot of faith in those two offices. So it is all very viable, but the Auditor General's report is 831 pages long. So it's kind of hard to tell you everything that's in it. But all I can say is we respect the Auditor General, and we feel that the Auditor General's office should have more power and should be listened to by government. The Auditor General has not been listened to by the government, and this is why we're in the mess we are today. Thank you.
Without a doubt, we absolutely have to have a meaningful plan. Right today, we spend $1 billion a month on interest. That's not providing any long-term care services. That's not providing health care. That's providing no education. It certainly isn't providing for the less vulnerable. This current government actually predicted they were going to have a $5.7 billion deficit. The Auditor General and the Fiscal Accountability Officer have come out and corrected that and said it's going to be an $11 billion deficit. That's twice as much as what they predicted. We know we are at historically low interest rates. If those interest rates start to go up, we spend more and more money on our debt. It's no different than you with a credit card. If you max out your credit cards, all of your money is going to the payment. Nothing is going to the principal. That means we're not going down the road of becoming a better community or a better province. We're actually going deeper in the hole. We have a government that actually moved $4 billion. They moved money from the government's books onto OPG's books to say they balance the budget. That's costing you as a taxpayer $4 billion because OPG cannot borrow the money at the same rate as the province of Ontario. So there's $4 billion right off the hop. Most of the economists would tell you, save for a rainy day. When things are booming, you put some away. We all know we've all lived through rainy days. You can't continually to go further and further in debt. This budget alone is another $12 billion that you are going to pay interest. Your grandchildren and you will not see that money going to services. It's paying off the debt. We cannot have more debt or we will go bankrupt.
All of our candidates would make great radio personalities in that they seem to be able to time their answers extremely well. So our second question as the Chamber is, what in your view should be the primary source of Ontario's future prosperity? And how can Grey Bruce contribute to and benefit from this prosperity? In other words, what's holding us back? So again, what in your view should be the primary source of Ontario's future prosperity, and how can we join in? Karen? I think we're going straight down, we're going down the line each time. Well, wait. Okay, we can do that. That will be a lot more confusing for the moderator.
We'll walk you through it, Ross. It's okay. Yeah, we got this. This is the third one for the four of us. So, I think one of the sources, the biggest source of prosperity for our province and for our community is our youth. Last night, all four of us were down in Hanover at the Launchpad at a youth-based debate. There are more debates by young people in this election scheduled than there are adult debates, which tells me our young people are engaged. It tells me our young people are seeing and want to get involved in our community. We talk about the skills gap. We talk about the refurbishments at Bruce Power and the opportunities there for the trades and the apprenticeships, and for our young people and our millennials to gain that work experience and get those amazing jobs that are coming in. And I think that prosperity piece that Bruce Power is bringing to our community is amazing. They've taken a huge leadership role, and we need to support that. And one of the reasons we got that refurbishment was because nuclear is the second cheapest power in the province. And so we've got that solid. We've got those 4,000, 6,000, 7,000 jobs over on the shoreline that are impacting this area. So I think that's the local piece is our, the next generation that's coming that plays with all the devices and all the technology and doesn't, run circles around the rest of us sometimes. So, thank you.
Well, I do have to agree, it is our youth. On top of that, though, the youth needs the tools to grow and prosper. They also need less regulation. As it stands right now in Ontario, as of 2016, we have 380,000 pieces of regulation. If you want to be in the construction industry, the building code regulation is 867 pages long. I know, I've read it. So you have to know all of that. And then you have extra books of hundreds of pages specific to your trade. That is wrong. Because when you go through an apprenticeship, yes, you need classroom, you need exams. But having a building code regulation that is only supposed to be specific for structural safety, that is 867 pages long, that brings in portable trailers, there's something wrong. So my expectation is college courses need to be started in Owen Sound. We need to open up the education for the trades. We need to remove all of the bureaucratic specifications that you need with the College of Trades, because all that is a money grab for the College of Trades and patronage appointments. This is what we want. We want our young people to thrive and grow and be innovative and inventive. Thank you.
What we have to do fundamentally is open Ontario back up for business and let people know that they can invest in Ontario and create a prosperous. We used to be the economic engine of Canada, and we are no longer that. We need to open up for skilled trades and train people for today and change our apprenticeship system so right out of high school, people can actually start getting credit for the hours they work and get them into the workforce. If people are working, if our economy is truly booming and there are jobs and businesses in Ontario, then that is the best way to predict how we're going to have a sustainable future. Bruce Power refurbishment is absolutely critical to our area, but it's across the province. Just think of all the components that are made for something like a nuclear reactor, that all 95% of them are made in Ontario. We need to make sure that we embrace technology and have our greatest and brightest minds here. Think of the BlackBerry and how quickly it came, the Canadarm and the things that we can invent right here in Ontario that put good Ontarians to work. We need to stop overspending. Again, if we're spending more, no different than your home budget. If you're overspending, you're not investing money in productivity in your business and creating more jobs for the people that are coming up. We need to ensure that at the end of the day, we get our energy rates lowered. We have the highest energy rates in North America. We've lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs. If we get those rates down and become more competitive, more people will come back to Ontario, more people will expand in Ontario. The red tape is absolutely a concern, and we need to make sure we have competitive taxes. The United States just lowered their taxes. We just raised ours. The Liberal government in their last budget raised taxes on business. They have been continually hammering business, which makes it very challenging to continue to sustain and create jobs.
Bill said that they want to open Ontario for business. Well, when the Conservatives opened Ontario for business under Mike Harris, the large corporations started fleeing Ontario. So we don't need that. Yes, we need to be open for business. We need to have them here. But we need to have things in place to keep them here. So we need to buy back Ontario Hydro One. That is going to lower hydro rates. The other parties don't have a plan that is actually going to lower hydro rates, except for the Liberals' shell game that lowers them for a little bit. So we need to make sure that the big corporations stop leaving. However, it's actually the small businesses that are the backbone of our community here. We need to help those small businesses. When the minimum wage was raised, which had to be done, but it should have started years ago so it wasn't all at once and a big imposition on those small businesses, it was because the NDP fought and fought to lower the small business income tax that the Liberals changed from their first bill to a couple of weeks later they actually put in a lower tax rate for those small businesses. So it's the NDP that support the small businesses. We also have to invest in our youth and keep our youth here. Thank you.
So our next question is also for all of the candidates, but we'll begin with Elizabeth Marshall. And what we're asking is, if elected, and this is something that is really important to the Owen Sound Chamber, will you ensure that provincially appointed arbitrators take into full consideration the fiscal capacity of small municipalities to pay those big city-driven wage awards to firefighters and police services?
I take the pledge. I will do everything to supply and support our small rural municipalities. I've read the reports. The schools are being closed, and our small municipalities are being destroyed for big urban wants. As it stands right now, the Progressive Conservatives say they have found $6 billion in efficiencies. One problem with that, $5 billion is going into the Scarborough subway. Think about that. That's why I'm saying, yes, I do appreciate the small rural communities and the fact that the big city wages cannot be paid for firefighters and police. And there needs to be some form of equity in regards to that. They have to take into consideration, and that is the provincial job, to ensure that the municipalities get the funding they need and deserve to support those services for the people of this province, whether they live in large urban areas or in small, rural, and remote communities. That's my stand. Thank you very much.
Certainly in this, the 2 terms that I've been able to serve, this has been a continuing issue that is out there, and it's a very challenging issue, particularly for small rural areas. The city of Owen Sound is one of those that has been fighting this and has a very big concern, but most of our small rural areas, on a very small tax base, it's very, very challenging. Our critic of finance, Vic Fideli, was the mayor of North Bay. The first year that they went into this, they spent $800,000 on a study trying to build a business case to show the arbitrator that they just could not sustain this. And they virtually didn't even read the report. They turned it over and said, no, we're going to continue along. The second year they did, they said, we might as well put the $800,000 into the actual wages we're going to pay, because the arbitrators weren't listening. It's not sustainable. With our tax base, with the burdens that our people are facing, there is only one taxpayer. You are it. Regardless of whether it's provincial or whether it's municipal, there's only one tax base. And the ability to pay has to be a significant component that's in there. It's like I've said with the school closures, 600 schools closed under this Liberal government. If you don't have the ability to pay, if you do not take into account the community impact, that is going to have continually negative impacts for your community for many, many years to come. You have to be able to plead that case. It has to be rational. And you can't just continue to say yes, yes, and yes again. And let's not forget the debt that our province is on. We're going to be $339 billion in debt, and somebody has to pay all that money back. That would be you and me.
There are going to be 2 facets to my answer. So at the beginning, I'm going to talk about the arbitration. And arbitrators should and are supposed to take into account the ability to of the city or the employer to pay when they make their decisions and rulings. That is supposed to already be happening. The other side of that is how much money the municipalities have had cut from their budgets over the years and years, and yet the services are downloaded. And for 20 years, under the Conservatives, under the Liberals, they haven't fixed it. Services are downloaded with no extra funding. That's not right. And the NDP would reverse that. The NDP would work with the municipalities to make sure they have the funding, that we have the funding that we need here in Owen Sound, in Grey County, in Bruce County, to look after the services that we need in our municipalities, including fire and police. Thank you.
So absolutely, I've been talking to some of the city councillors about this issue, and absolutely, this is one of the issues I want to take to Queen's Park and actually get some results on and make that change, because ability to pay is really important. We have to protect our rural community. We have to have a rural voice down there that explains these things in a way that people can understand and work around. Thank you.
Okay, another question from the chamber, and this will start with Bill. A lot of Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound communities have been disrupted by school closings. Everybody is blaming the funding formula. So we want to know how your party plans to alter the funding formula, and also what you personally would like to see change to improve education, public education in rural Ontario.
So I've been very vocal on this issue for the last 3 years, and at the end of the day, 600 schools have been closed. It infuriated me that they would actually come out with a directive to say close those schools, particularly schools like Derby, Markdale, Paisley, single community schools. And then after a lot of pressure and a lot of other people speaking up, and I give the communities a great deal of support for doing that and commend them, they actually said, we'll put a group together and we'll travel the province for 2 years and study this. Would it not have made sense to do the study 2 years before you started to do the closures? What happens to those single community schools and the ripple effect to those communities? You take your school out, what's next? The grocery store. You take the grocery store and the school out, what's left and why are people moving there? In my first ARC review, the ARC review had 3 components to it. One of them was community impact. They stripped that community impact out between the first time they did the reviews and the second time, and we pleaded with them again this time to put it back in, and they have not chosen to do that. At the end of the day, if we can't build a business case in places like Paisley and Markdale, and luckily in Markdale we had the Chapman family, and I commend them, but you're not going to have that in every community around the province, and it sets a very challenging precedent for other communities to have to come up with that kind of money. And who sustains it going down the road? We need to ensure that our schools are the fundamental. Most people in this room, I believe, will agree. Education is fundamental to our future. To everything we do, you have to have a good education. At the end of the day, we will make sure we review. The Liberals in 2 other elections promised to review and fix that funding formula. They have not done it. I don't believe they'll do it going forward.
Bill is correct. We are not going to have a private company that's willing to fund our public school system in every community. And in fact, that's kind of a dangerous road to go down. The NDP does have a plan. So first I'm going to mention that I was part of an accommodation review process a couple of years ago. My kids went to Hepworth School, and Hepworth and Sauble were being reviewed. Hepworth School actually makes money for the school board. I wasn't concerned about it being closed because of that, but that's a problem if you have some schools that are making money for other schools and then other schools that are not funded enough, and partly they're not funded enough because they have community areas or because they have hallways that are too big and they're counted as school areas. So unless you put desks in the hallways, it doesn't make sense. The funding formula is broken. We need to fix it. First, we would stop the school closures right away. No more school closures. Second, we would consult with parents, teachers, frontline workers, find out what makes the most sense when we fix the funding formula. We don't want it to just come from Toronto and have a Toronto-based answer. We want a solution that is going to work for us here in Grey Bruce, across the province, and that will make our school system better. Thank you.
So the fundamental challenge with rural school closures is the declining enrollment piece. You can't keep empty buildings going. It's just not cost effective. Absolutely, there's a moratorium right now on school closures. They are reviewing the program. I know, because we talked about that when we talked about the challenges of our rural community. And bringing these issues to Queen's Park, having those conversations has been really important, because people need to understand that our kids cannot sit on a bus for an hour, hour and a half every day going to school. They need those after-school programs. So I have been that rural voice down in Queen's Park, bringing those issues to the decision makers. Moratoriums and stops have been put in place. They're reviewing the process. They're reviewing the reviews of what's going to happen going forward. And I'm really hoping that we'll be able to make make a whole system-wide change of how we run schools and how we look at things like the Chesley Ag program. I was talking to those students at Katie this morning and bought a planter off them because it was pretty amazing. We've got to keep those programs going, and I find them really important, and I'm going to fight for them tooth and nail on your behalf. Thank you.
Well, I've only been working for 9 years trying to stop the school closures quietly in the background because I read legislation. So the first time the school closures actually stopped was when I presented the fact that kids were not to ride school buses, particularly small children, for more than 45 minutes. So I set up the times, and because of the school closures that were slated, they couldn't actually close the schools. So what happened? They amended the legislation, and that's not there anymore. So this time I went through the legislation, and there's nothing in there. Actually, the school board trustees are to make accommodation. Secondly, under the purpose of the Act, anyone who's involved in education is supposed to strive for the well-being of the child, and yet under the guide for the trustees, it tells them that their duty is actually to the image and fiscal viability of the school boards. So technically, the government is misleading our school board trustees into violating the purpose of the Act. So I sent that in, and I spoke about this at the Markdale meeting that the government had. The moratorium came very shortly after. I think that was pointed out to the Liberal MPP that was there and the 8 bureaucrats that he brought with him. Thank you.
Okay, our next question. We have a dire shortage of long-term care beds in Ontario. We want to know what your party will do to begin to remedy this immediately. We'll start with Karen.
We do have a plan to bring new long-term care beds. It is definitely a big problem. One issue we have right here in Grey County is the closure and moving of Grey Gables. You may have heard of that. They want to move Grey Gables, the beds from there, to Durham. It's only 20 minutes away. It doesn't sound that bad. But if you're coming from the east of Markdale, which is where Grey Gables is, right now if you live half an hour away, you move it another 20 minutes, that makes it basically almost an hour in 2 directions. It stops people from being able to visit their loved ones in a single evening. That's a problem. We need to make sure that long-term care facilities are available in all our communities. We need to have an inquiry to make sure that they are staffed properly, there's too much violence in them. And the other thing is that we need to make sure that the residents have a minimum of 4 hours per day of care. That is not there, and that is the recommended minimum amount of care that we have for our loved ones. These are our parents, our grandparents, our friends that need to be looked after and respected. There are seniors. Thank you.
So I believe the pledge is 15,000 new beds in the next couple of years with the new budget. 15,000, 5,000. But we've got to do a better job of planning. We need to have various levels of care so that people are not necessarily, if they can age at home, then age at home. We need to have an integrated support system so people can step down and they can move out of the hospital and they can move into supportive care, that we support the PSWs out in the community doing the work, the valuable work that they're doing, so people don't have to go into care homes. We need to plan better. We knew this was coming 30 years ago. They wrote the book, Boom, Bust, and Echo, that we needed to build schools that would become long-term care facilities, and we didn't plan. And now what we're seeing is the effect of that non-planning. So we need to plan better. We need to look at the resources we have in the community and get it all coordinated so that when somebody is discharged, they're discharged into a system where there's planners and there's PSWs at home and there's physiotherapists in the home, so that we're not having to build these really expensive beds. Thank you.
I didn't know it was my turn or not. I got caught up listening to her. Anyways, so the whole thing is we need more PSWs. We need more beds. We need more money, and that's the problem, because under the Financial Accountability Officer's report, there has been restriction on the frontline workers and on hospitals since 2011. That's in his report. So we have empty beds in the hospitals. We have really all of these people. Yes, it's in his report. And this is the problem. We need PSWs. I've seen people who are PSWs in tears because they only have 6 to 11 minutes to get someone who's in a senior bed out of their bed, cleaned up, dressed, and down for breakfast. That's abuse. And so we need better training facilities, which we have a plan for. We also have a plan to open up those beds in the hospitals and get the funding back to the front line where it belongs. As it stands right now, we are wasting about $100 million a year on the local health integrated networks, the LHINs. Then when you think about it, there are 4 or 5 other entities under the Ministry of Health doing exactly the same research and reports that the LHINs are. That has to stop. That $100 million definitely should be going into frontline workers and PSWs. Thank you.
So this is an area near and dear to my heart. I asked to actually be the critic for long-term care, and Francesca, you're right. We should have known 30 years ago. Your government knew 30 years ago, and for the last 15 years certainly has known it. I've gone to estimates for 2 years in a row. You said you were going to redevelop 30,000 beds. If I'm kind, you've done 1/3 of those. It's time to actually start doing the action, not to study, not to look at it. At the end of the day, we have $25 billion your government borrowed for a 2-year fair energy rebate on your hydro. What could we have done with $25 billion for all of the seniors in long-term care? We have committed 15,000 beds, and that's why I wanted to correct you, because your government came out and said we will do 5,000 beds, but for the last 3 budgets, there wasn't 1 single cent in the budget for long-term care beds. Ironically, with a lot of heat put on by people like myself and our opposition parties, you now, ironically, in an election year, said we'll come out and we'll build 5,000 beds. It's not enough. 15,000 is what we've committed to, 30,000 over 10 years, and that will allow people that are now kept in hospital. The most costly form of health care we have is a hospital bed. Those people will actually be able to move. The caregivers will have some respite, and at the end of the day, we need to ensure that, again, the debt isn't going into interest payments, it's going to frontline care. More PSWs, more touch with those individuals, and end up that we have the ability to give those seniors the dignity and respect that they deserve. They built this country. We need to be there for them in their time of need.
I think perhaps that a rebuttal could possibly be in order, but not under the rules as they stand. So if we get some of those questions perhaps from our audience, we'll be able to drill down a little deeper. A question that those of us who are really keen on Owen Sound Harbor and some of the great things that could happen there, we'd like to ask, how will you collaborate with the federal and local governments to redevelop the Owen Sound Harbor so that once again it can be a significant source of economic growth, recreational enjoyment, and a real tourist attraction? So now I have lost track of who's... Is it you?
It's me. The biggest risk around the harbor is what's underneath the harbor, the concerns around the environmental. So we have to be careful that we don't let the city take on something that is just completely unmanageable in terms of cost, in terms of cleanup. Really pleased to see the announcement over the weekend about the redevelopment of the lot here with rental units being built. That's absolutely amazing. We need more rental units, so it's fantastic that that's coming in. So we're starting to see that development around the harbor. I would like to see more development around the harbor and encouraging businesses, having the city work with all 3 levels of government to create more businesses that collaborate together, make sense to be in that environment. You know, we should be having, you know, kayak rentals and canoe rentals there, and making sure that some of the regulations that Liz likes to talk about are out of the way. You know, we don't want to get, sorry Todd, the insurance companies in the middle of it all, because that's what stifles innovation, is that opportunity. And there's a lot of opportunity for small businesses, micro businesses, summer company, all of those things to take advantage of that harbor. I kayak it once it warms up personally, and it's just amazing to be out there on the water. Thank you.
So the thing is, we have a harbor here and we would like to utilize it. This has been done time and time again in various areas of the province. All you have to do is look at Hamilton. So why is the province not petitioning the federal government to actually pay for the harbor, considering constitutionally the public waterways on the Great Lakes is a federal issue? Have the federal government pay for the studies that are needed to be done, and let's get it built back up again. Let's get the businesses back in there. Let's open it up. Perhaps we should even set up an area so that we could have industry here again for jobs and to have shipping lanes on the Great Lakes again. They're not thinking outside of the box. This could be a huge, huge moneymaker for Owen Sound, and yet it's being stymied by reports. The federal government isn't stepping up. So why are we not stepping up to the federal government and saying, pay for your property, Mr. Federal Government, we deserve it? Thank you.
The harbor is a prime example where we could have all three levels of government that should and could be working together to do these type of things. But what we need is infrastructure money. And there'd be a lot more infrastructure money, and I'm going to bring up, and I'm going to keep coming back to the debt and overspending our limits, because that money is now not there to be able to invest for the improvements and the things that could make our communities even more sustainable. $133 billion for the Green Energy Act over the next 20 years. What could we have done as a province with $133 billion invested in things like our harbor? $25 billion for the Fair Energy hydro rebate for 2 years. And your rates, by the way, after those 2 years, the Financial Accountability Officer and the Auditor General have already said they start to go back up. So none of that money is going to fix your hydro rates or bring them down. $8 billion on an e-health program that we have nothing to show for it. What could we have done if we'd have taken all of that money and put it into things like infrastructure? We have fought for the 6 years, and I believe John Yakubuski, my colleague, for 3 years before me, to get a fair share of the gas tax for all municipalities. Owen Sound, Meaford, and Hanover are the only three in Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound that get a share of the gas tax because we have public transit of some sort in those three municipalities. If we had more money for infrastructure across the board, we would be able to do those type of things, and we should be engaging a lot more with private enterprise to do things, to develop things like the harbor. We have to be in partnership. We have to find a balance between the private and the public sectors to ensure that we can do that. And at the end of the day, folks, we cannot forget, every cent we're spending in debt is not money that's here for things like our harbor renewal or development. Thank you.
First of all, as Francesca alluded to, we do have to make sure that if the harbor is cleaned, that it is done with the scientific evidence that the sludge is cleaned up safely. So that's something that we need to be careful of. We want to make sure that that water doesn't get polluted. Secondly, we need to make sure that the municipality is not saddled with the cost of cleaning it. It is a federally legislated body because it's the water. However, the province can have a role to collaborate between municipalities and the federal government. So I would commit to trying to work with all levels of government to make sure it is clean. The other thing that Bill was talking about was infrastructure money, and absolutely, municipalities need to have more money for their infrastructure. The NDP has a plan for that. Bill Walker and Doug Ford and the Conservatives have no plan. So Bill is talking a good talk. We're going to fund healthcare, we're going to fund schools, we're going to fund municipalities better, but if there's not money there and they're worried about the debt, money doesn't grow on trees. The NDP has the only plan that has a reasonable way of getting money, and that's by taxing the highest, most wealthy, to fund the services, the infrastructure that we all need. Thank you.
I think our next question, that one dealing with the harbor in Owen Sound, which has the federal government in such a pivotal position, but all around rural Grey Bruce, farms, businesses, and communities are struggling to stay competitive and sustainable. We want to know what policies and investments your party will implement to reverse this situation. We're starting with Elizabeth Marshall.
So I was at the Grey County Federation of Agriculture meeting in regards to the assessments on farms. And it turns out that on the farms, the barns and the outbuildings are not actually assessed at their true market current value, but they are assessed at replacement value. So if you have a barn that's been there for 100 years and it's only worth $150, no, actually it gets appraised at the replacement value, and so it drives your assessed value up. And so now farmers in Grey County are looking at an increase of up to and over 71% on their property taxes. So now I hear they have been trying to work with Grey County because Grey County actually has the municipal authority to reduce the amount of taxes those farmers have to pay. I also sent a letter into the Ministry of Municipal Affairs explaining that MPAC has gone beyond their legislative authority because it says current value, not replacement value. In regards to small business, we need to actually start buying more local. We need to support each other. But on the other hand, we also need to have the education and the skills to move forward the industry and the jobs. And we aren't getting that. Thank you.
So we've heard loud and clear, particularly from the farming community and our small business community, that they are under siege right now by the government. They continually have more administration, more red tape, more costs being put to them. The hydro cost alone for many businesses putting them in a precarious situation of how long they're going to hang on. I've had a number of businesses come through my door saying, Bill, I don't know how much longer I can survive if they continue to add costs to me. Most of our small little mom and pop shops, which we have around Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound, are not those big greedy corporations that we keep hearing about from some of the parties, and that we're going to add more corporate tax to them. We need to make sure that we cut red tape. We need to look at investing in agriculture more than we do. This government, I asked the first year I got here, $25 million over 7 years would totally rejuvenate the whole apple industry if we think of Meaford in that area. $25 million for our whole province to rejuvenate a whole industry, and they've never funded that or put any money towards that yet. There's something in our own backyard that could have a huge ripple effect to all of us. The Chamber of Commerce and the Canadian Federation of Independent Business both came out and said, when we were looking at Bill 148, that there was no consultation. They were both saying how we were doing it was wrong. Everybody agrees that minimum wage had to be increased, but the timing you were using and how you were going to do it, they both had various concerns from business perspective. And if business isn't booming, folks, they're cutting hours back. They're cutting shifts. I've got grocery stores now saying, we're going to start cutting Sundays. We're going to start cutting shifts. And that is very, very challenging in our small rural communities, because that goes back into the people that you know in those grocery stores. Thank you.
In the rural areas, many people are disadvantaged. The gas prices are going up, the hydro prices are going up. These are all things that are affecting all of us, but they affect farmers at a higher rate than the rest of us, because the farmers need hydro, need gas to run their tractors and run their farms. So we need to make sure that those things are looked after. The other thing we need to do is we have to have a provincial food strategy, and that's something that the NDP commits to make sure that farmers can sell their produce locally, that there is a market locally for the things that they're producing for us. The other thing is that we need to work with the federal government to reduce the trade instability. A lot of the pressures on farms right now are actually coming from things like NAFTA. which is a federal issue, but the province has a role to look after our people here in Grey Bruce. Thank you.
So the provincial Liberals are investing $500 billion into supporting new businesses. Foodland Ontario is a fantastic program which supports local agricultural, local food, celebrating local food that way. We continue to invest in people. And that's what the minimum wage increase is about. I think it's very fundamental that people who have jobs shouldn't have to go to the food bank for their groceries. They should be able to go to the farmers markets and to those locations and get to the grocery store to buy the food they need. We needed to put that minimum wage up. And that puts more disposable income out into our economy, so people are actually shopping at mom and pop stores rather than getting stuck shopping only at big box stores. The burden reduction bill that was passed in the spring of last year eliminated a lot of red tape for businesses and streamlined a lot of changes that are positive for businesses. We're investing in our community. We're investing in Ontario. Thank you.
And I would like to thank the candidates for answering the questions that the Chamber has formulated. It's now 8 o'clock, and we're going to move into questions from the audience here. And I'm going to start with a question for Bill Walker, the sitting member. And I should just review the way this part of the program works, that if we ask a specific question of one of you, you have 90 seconds to answer, and others have 60 seconds to rebut. And Bill, the question is, give us an example of one major efficiency that your government will introduce that will not involve anyone losing their job.
I don't think there has to be any job cuts, frankly. What we need to be looking at, there will be natural attrition, and we need to look at every single role that's out there and say, is that providing value? No different from you with your home budget. You take $1 and you say, what am I going to do with that $1? Where am I going to invest it, and what's it going to give me at the end of the day? I think there are all kinds of things. If you look again at the Community Care Access Centre, they were a whole different level of government. The government said, we're going to get rid of them. We're going to actually get rid of them. What they did is they blended them into the local health integration network. Not one person lost a job. Most of them were all administrative people. No frontline care to health care. So there is a prime example there that you could have looked and said, how are we going to diversify? When I worked at Bruce Power, I took lean training. And you look at any process that you want to look at across any industry, and you can look at every step, and you can find efficiencies, and there's no one that can tell me that with this Liberal government and how they've run our province for the past 15 years, you can't find efficiencies. But what you do is you take people and you put them where they actually have value and where they're going to actually drive the economy. They're going to drive more jobs. They're going to drive more health care, and you're going to put more money back to the front line because those people are focused. We have 1 million civil servants. I continually hear people saying, we need to hire a consultant. We need to have another study. We need to study more. We need to take the people that we have and turn it around and say, we need everybody to be accountable that that's your dollar, and what would you do if this was your money in your house, and how would you actually spend it?
I think the biggest problem is people aren't reading the Auditor General's report. So I've read the Auditor General's report in regards to LINS. And LINS is only required to do 14 things, and out of those 14 things, the various LINS didn't fulfill even 4 of those obligations. On top of that, the Auditor General wanted to know, you have this supplier at one of the LINS. They are overcharging you and not fulfilling their obligations. Why are you not punishing them? Oh, well, they're really nice and I didn't want to offend them. That's where your money is being wasted. There is no oversight, and the Minister of Health actually renegotiates every individual contract with the LINS and makes it so they don't have to fulfill their obligations. That's where we save $100 million. Thank you.
Efficiencies could be cuts. I run a charity. You don't get much more efficient than running a charity because you put most of the money back out into the community and you don't spend it on administration, you spend it on frontline programs. Absolutely, there's going to be cuts if we go down Bill's road because that's the only way to save money, because you stop investing in people and you find the efficiencies. And, you know, Karen talks about the 4 hours of care. Absolutely, that's going to become 3.5 hours of care, and maybe your family should come in on every other Sunday because we're just not going to staff it.
The Conservatives are promising better health care and lower income taxes and finding efficiencies. You can't have it both ways. Either you invest in the services we need, or you find efficiencies, which are cuts. There's no way other way about that. The other thing is that the sorry, I've actually lost what I was going to say. There's just no other way. Efficiencies are cuts. If you're going to invest, then invest. But the Liberals are talking about cuts. They're talking about cutting $6.1 billion across the board. We don't want that. The healthcare has been frozen. The hospital budgets have been frozen. That's actually cuts. We need to increase them. At inflation, their costs go up every year. We need to increase their funding every year, at least with inflation.
Our next question, I'm going to take the liberty of directing this to you, Karen Geventner, and then others can rebut. Bruce Power is a major employer in our area. What is your party going to do to support more nuclear energy projects in Ontario?
Bruce Power is very important to our area. It has brought in a lot of money. It has good jobs there. The NDP has committed to make sure that before building any new nuclear or before refurbishing, that we will make sure that a full cost accounting is done and a full environmental assessment is done. So in other words, we will not build new nuclear. We don't need more energy. We have an overproduction right now. We won't do refurbishments without knowing that they will not have overruns. Many, many projects, including the nuclear power plants, have had huge overruns. Everyone, I'm sure, would agree that that's a mistake. We have to know what the actual cost is before we commit to it. Thank you.
I'm going to keep this short because most of Bruce Power's investment is private money, and that's where the risk lies, is with the people that are investing with Bruce Power, their owners, their shareholders. And we need that in our community.
Well, maybe we should have taken the billions of dollars we're wasting on green energy and put it into water power, and then we wouldn't have to use more nuclear. Bruce is good. I have nothing against Bruce. Actually, I have friends that actually work there. On top of that, though, with the Fair Hydro Plan, that's where, even if people repeal the Green Energy Act, the wind turbines stay. And that's the biggest problem, and it's wrong. So we are going to be continuing on down this rabbit hole because the moratorium on wind and solar, the renewable energy projects under the Fair Hydro Plan, which the PCs are keeping, is only going to be continuing because she's already allowed 390 more contracts that were left in the queue. So we have 390 more projects to go forward. We got to do something about that. More water, thank you.
Francesca was short, so I'll use a bit of her time as well. And I just want to, that last question, you talked about efficiencies, both you and Karen wanted to talk about efficiencies. And the Liberal budget this time, if you really read it, there's actually $14.4 billion in what they're calling efficiencies. If it's us, they call it cuts. If it's them, they call it efficiencies. So I just want you to know that there's $14.4 billion in efficiencies in the current Liberal budget. And another change we would make, the $6.5 million man at Hydro. Hydro-Quebec CEO and BC Hydro CEO make $450,000. Our CEO in Ontario makes $6 million with his own benefit, and they just gave the board of directors a $25,000 increase to their salaries today. I can tell you 100% I'm fully supportive of nuclear. If you think of what would happen to our community around here without Bruce Power and the spin-off economic benefit, not just to our community but to the province. As I say, 90% of the components are manufactured in Ontario. Those are jobs across our province, developing the components, developing all the parts that we need, and all of those skilled trades for our generations that are coming up, our future generation. That's where a lot of the jobs for this area and our economic prosperity will be derived from. Thank you.
I think we'll ask this question of each of the candidates. The Liberals advocate for government control of the marijuana industry. Doug Ford says he wants the private sector involved. What's your position? Would you be in favor of local private distribution of marijuana? And Karen, I think we start with you. Is that right? Who's ended with Bill? Okay.
I can start with that, sure. So the NDP does not support the privatization. It supports LCBO-like distribution. There is a problem with the current plan, which has 40 sites. That's not enough for all of Ontario to get rid of like a black market for marijuana. The LCBO brings in money to help us pay for things like our health care and our schools. The other thing is that it has people employed there that are well trained to make sure that that alcohol is not being sold to underage kids. If you know about tobacco sales, it is not uncommon that your mom and pop corner stores will not do the best job of weeding out people, forgive the pun, of not selling to underage. That is a fact. We need to make sure that we have trained people like the LCBO, the public sector, selling cannabis. And do your research. That is a fact. I work at the public health unit. I know what the stats are about tobacco sales. Thank you.
I'd like us to take a two-step process to this. So for the first couple of years, 2 to 3 years, have it with the LCBO, see how it rolls out, see how we can manage the safety aspect of impaired driving, and see how things are going. And then once we get a handle on the market, open it up then to the general public, as we've done with the beer and wine sales out into the community, into the grocery stores. Thank you.
Wow. That's news to me about Doug Ford, because on Focus Ontario about 2 or 3 weeks ago, he said he wanted to do the LCBO to try it out and see how it works and then open it up in a few years. The Trillium plan has been and always will be private distribution. Have it regulated to the nines. Charge them licensing fees and then take that money and put it into health care. I worked with a senator in regards to the legalization of marijuana. I did a report, and I fully understand the ramifications of the use of marijuana. And these 40 to 150 LCBOs, we are always going to have kids getting pot off the streets if we do not eliminate that through private distribution, because that's not going to cut it with the population of Ontario. Thank you.
I think anything we look at, this is brand new for all of us. It's a federal initiative, but it's going to come rolling into all of our provinces. But I think we have to always put it through the filter of it's controlled, it's safe, and we have to have an educational component as well. Karen, it's interesting that you talk about private businesses and say they don't do as good a job. Most of the people that own businesses in these communities are business leaders, they're community leaders who give to their communities and invest in their communities and are the people that philanthropically support our communities well. So to say that they actually aren't able to do this equally well, I think is a discredit to all of them. This morning, in fact, I met with a pharmacist here in the city who believes that there's a great already resource available. They're already in the drug business. They're already giving medicines. Why would we not look at a combination of that? The LCBO certainly is an opportunity. The beer store is private sector, and we seem to be able to be okay with people buying beer at a grocery store through a private sector. So I'm not certain why we can't find a way to do this where all individuals, if we come to the table and say, what's the best benefit for all Ontarians? We want to look at convenience, access, particularly the medicinal side. I've talked to friends. It's the only thing they found after years and years of trying other things that's actually helping them. Our pharmacists provide a great level of health care. I think it's something we should be exploring and seeing if that's an opportunity. The network's already there, the resources are there, and certainly the educational component is their primary thought process. Thank you.
Here's a question for each of our candidates. Someone in the audience would like to know what in your platform is going to help senior citizens to live independently, and I'm going to take that a step further. I expect you mean to live in your own house. Is there something in your platform that would help people do that? And who's next?
Am I next? Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm the senior question. About 10 years ago, I lost my parents, and they were supposed to have community care access. And actually, the one time my dad went into the hospital, and a woman came in and she said, well, we're going to set all this up, but we have to send your father to Barrie from the Collingwood Hospital for respite. And I said, no, that's unacceptable. My father's a veteran. So I got involved with Veterans Affairs. But as I went through that process and I saw the difficulties that my parents were having, I wanted, with every fiber of my being, to let my mom and dad spend as much time as they possibly could together. I actually had to move in with my mom and dad to look after them. My father was very, very sick, heart attacks and strokes. My mom had cancer. And all we could get was someone to maybe come and babysit my dad when I had to take my mom for treatments. So my plan is to ensure that CCAC or whichever local entity, because now we have a new one that is coordinated, gets there and helps these people, and it's not just 2 hours of babysitting, come in, shave dad, and a shower, and out the door. They need help, and we need to help them. They deserve it. Thank you.
So fundamental premise, again, is that 15,000 beds that we pledged. That will take people out of the hospitals and actually put more resources into the care that all of us need, not just long-term care, but all of our health care. We'll free up hallway health care. We don't need people in hallways and in health care anymore. Home care, most people, if you survey them, I actually did my long-term care tour across the province, and most people would suggest, if you do just an open survey, do you want to be at home if you can? And most of us are going to say absolutely yes, but that has to be resourced properly. There's a lady in the city of Owen Sound, 101 years old. They cut her health care in half. Now, who at 101 is going to need less care than more care as they get older? So what we need to do is fundamentally make sure we have the resources there for both home care and facilities like long-term care and our retirement homes. Because, as Francesca had mentioned earlier, the baby boom generation, as we've all known for 30 years, is on top of us. It's coming at us, and we need to make sure we do that. And it comes back again to fundamental. If we're wasting, if we're overspending by $12 billion a year, that's $12 billion a year that is not there at the frontline care for our seniors, whether it be at home care or whether it be in a long-term care facility.
I'm going to take a very short time to correct a bill. Don't twist my words. I already said the small businesses are the backbone of our society, and the corner store is a great place to buy chocolate bars and milk, not your cannabis. Thank you. Home care. We need a better home care system. We can't have people in the hallways of the emergency, in the emergency department, because they can't get to a wardroom, because they can't go from a wardroom to long-term care, and then people are stuck in long-term care because they can't go home. We need to improve our home care system. The NDP has in our platform a plan to invest $300 million more to improve it, to make sure people can stay at home longer and not fill up the long-term care beds that we need for people who can't be at home. Thank you.
So we have consensus. We all need to do better. We need people to age at home easier. There are many programs out there on the energy front to bring down the cost of electricity in people's homes so they can afford to stay in their three-bedroom home rather than moving into a smaller and smaller and smaller unit as they age. We need to do better. I don't disagree with that in any way, shape, or form. Our seniors are the backbone of our community in terms of that knowledge base, that legacy piece, those ideas. Everything that drives us is in the minds of our seniors, and we need to do better, and I couldn't agree more.
So I think, Bill, you are the next up in the order. Is that correct? So I have a question here, and I think it's great if you started anyway. If elected, will you support the planned raise in the minimum wage to $15 an hour?
So we've already said, and I've shared this with you many times, and we actually debated this bill for about a year and a half, trying to get the government to listen. No one has said that we don't need a higher minimum wage. Everybody agrees with that. It was how quickly and how they rammed it through all of the various areas. And some of the unintended consequences are going to be youth are not going to have as many jobs or get as many hours. I'm being told by people like grocery stores that we're going to start cutting shifts. We're going to start cutting back hours. So the concern we have is what's the ability to absorb this impact in 1 year? BC started to go down this path, and they went and put it over 5 years so businesses could have time to be able to adjust and actually accordingly fit it into their business cycle. And let's not be naive. If the costs are going up at your grocery store, you're going to pay higher costs at your grocery store. If costs are going up for your gas pumps, you're going to pay those increased costs. So everything you turn around, if the prices keep going up, you're going to pay for it. The other thing that they didn't give any consideration about was actually the ability to, the other ability is to have people that are making $20 an hour now and have been there for 10 years. They're saying, why can someone come in the first year and get $15? So I want to have $25. So there's that ratcheting effect that businesses don't have the ability to absorb. We definitely need to ensure that we do it in a strategic way. We need to do it in a balanced way. We should have consulted more with the business community. Just having a round table and saying that we had consultation is not consultation. It's not listening. There's a definite way we could have done it. We will review it, and we will ensure that over time it should go up on an annual basis.
So,
I'm okay if he has another 30 seconds. I don't know about the others. I said I'm okay if Bill has another 30 seconds. I don't know if people heard that.
I don't know if people were able to hear. Okay. And I'm not sure if you heard what the gentleman at the back who has been ejected from the meeting was saying, but he was complaining that some people are making millions of dollars a year but not really paying much income taxes because they have planners who help them avoid it.
Well, Ross, it's a good editorialization by you, but at the end of the day, those rules are in place for all of us. What we need to ensure, and I go back again to the very essence of debt. If a government is overspending, there's a lot less money to be out there that we could be paying wages across the board for everyone. Costs would be lower. Our energy costs went up by 300%. They're not coming down 300%. So those minimum wages are only going to be impacted. Our small business owners are people with debt. They're people that are carrying the risk and challenges of running a business and staying afloat. So we should have listened to them. We should have consulted much more broadly and said, how can we do this in a balanced manner? Most of the business people that I was talking to and came to me about this legislation said, if you'd have put this in over 3 or 5 years, we could have absorbed it. We wouldn't have had any major implications, but we had time to plan. It was all about the timing and how hard and how fast they rammed it through. And at the end of the day, as I say and I was trying to say, every one of us, the more wages go up, the more we pay. Nothing's free in this world. So if you want to keep moving things up, and that ratcheting effect will happen. The person who's making $20 an hour who's been there for 10 years isn't staying at $20 when the person coming through the door the first day of the job makes 15. So they're saying, oh, I want to raise for $3 an hour too. So we have to take this in balance. We have to work with the business community, and we have to ensure that we do this for the whole economy.
Thank you. Karen?
The short answer is yes, the NDP would increase the minimum wage to $15 and then would make sure that the minimum wage is increased with inflation, because we do not need to have happen again what happened this time. The minimum wage should have been raised over the years for many years so we didn't have this sudden jump all at once. We need to support our small businesses. As I said earlier, it's because the NDP fought to support the small businesses that we had their income tax rate drop a little bit with that the minimum wage increase this past year. The NDP would further support small businesses to make sure that they can afford it. Talking about the gas pumps and the grocery stores, they make a lot of money. They don't have a lot of staff. So really, it's only pennies that they have to increase their costs. So all across the board, we can afford to pay people a living wage. Everyone should be able to live.
So I'm just going to correct Bill a little bit on his energy. The average cost of a hydro bill for an Ontario in 2003 was $480, and it's just under $1,000 now. So that's a 100% increase, not a 300% increase. But moving on from the energy file to the minimum wage. Absolutely, we need to move to the $15 an hour. It's 18 months from implementation now. The average Canadian makes $27 an hour. So there's a huge income disparity between the top and the bottom wage earners. 30% of Ontario's working people were making minimum wage. 30%. That's no disposable income. That's just paying the basics. That's using the food bank. That's using utility assistance programs. That's not making a living. That's just simply existing. 30% of our population just existing. Thank you.
So I guess you can say all of us agree that minimum wage should have been increased gradually. So we're at the $14. Now, I was just talking with a fellow the other day, and it's the benefit packages and the paid holidays and the not paid 10 days you get off with no notice that is killing his business. So he is actually going to get rid of the benefits he has for his employees, because when they brought in this new plan, a Liberal MPP in Barrie said, well, if your business can't handle the increase, get a better business plan or go out of business. So a lot of people went out of business. Now, in regards to the $14, that is your constitutional right now to have that $14, but your employers do not have to supply you with benefits. So they just made a mess of your life.
The next question is for all of the candidates. We have the highest youth unemployment rate. It has reached 20%, the highest in Ontario. What is your party doing to help connect youth to jobs? And who is next in order? Is it
Karen?
Karen? Okay.
There's a number of things that we would need to do to connect youth to jobs. One is to help fund universities so people can go to university and get that education. We would immediately change the current interest. We would get rid of the interest for anyone who has a loan now, and we would change the loans to grants for anybody who goes to university. We would support the colleges. We also need apprenticeships. We're getting short on electricians and carpenters. We need to make sure that we support young people who want to go in that direction. It doesn't have to be an academic direction. Other things we need to do to encourage young people to stay in this area or come back to this area is to make life affordable here, keep schools open so that you can live here and have kids. Also, distance education is becoming more available, but that doesn't work if we don't have high-speed internet. If the NDP does pledge to have high-speed internet available across rural areas. So these are all things that would help young people get jobs and also locate here and be able to work in this area. Thank you.
One of the biggest barriers for youth unemployment in our area is the complete and utter lack of transportation, intra-city between our communities as well as within our cities. Working at the Galaxy Centre here in Owen Sound, the buses don't run after 6 o'clock. So how do you get to work? So that's a big barrier, and we have to address that transportation issue. We have free tuition for low-income and middle-income families going forward who want to go to any post-secondary college, apprenticeship programs, free tuition. OHIP Plus, so those who have medical needs and worries and concerns about leaving home, their medications are going to be covered for those that are 24 and under. All of those things come together, and then we look at skills gaps. We look at what training we need to have done. We need apprenticeship programs, all of those supports, and we need to work with the business community to understand what the jobs of tomorrow are so we can train for our kids for tomorrow.
Personally, I'm very disappointed in our college and university system right now. In some courses, when you take them in university or college and you're actually at a satellite, to finish that course, you have to travel to some other city to get finished. That's wrong. Not only that, Great Bruce-Owen Sound is a beautiful area. Why do we as a province not have a college or a university here that you can fulfill your expectations, your priorities, your education? We have Georgian College here, and it's a good college. But why are we not petitioning the government to have a university here? Make it a university town so that our kids can learn, grow, and be educated and get real jobs and bring those kids back here. Because we're losing our kids to the big urban areas because they cannot find the education and the employment they need and deserve in this area. Thank you.
I just met about 3 weeks ago with about a dozen manufacturers just over here at the Best Western, and what they were telling me is every single one of them have jobs. They can't find the skilled trades to actually fill those. So we again need to do a much better job as government of assessing what the needs of the future are going to be and training for those. We're still training for jobs from 10 years ago. We have people who have gone through school, through college, through university, not getting jobs, and we need to address that. We need to certainly adopt SWIFT, the fiber optic that's going to come here. And again, I go back, if we'd have invested the $25 billion on the Fair Hydro Act that's going to come back for 2 years, we could have actually had that across our province, particularly southwestern Ontario, and help with that. We need to look at our apprenticeship programs and our co-op programs and make those thrive. In most of the European countries, your apprenticeships actually start in high school. All of the hours, whether you're volunteering or working part-time, go towards your apprenticeship so those people could be there. We have Georgian College in our own backyard. We need to be more flexible and allow them to move with greater speed and urgency to fill the needs that we have locally. And Bruce Power with the redevelopment are going to provide a lot of jobs. We can work with them and the college to train our youth so the jobs are there and filled when we need them.
Francesca, I think you're next up for our next question, which is, what is your vision for affordable housing in Grey Bruce?
I'd like some. This is the next crisis. There's nowhere to live. You know, like I said earlier, we've gotten word on the new build it's just behind us, that's coming in the next 18 months. We need to allow infilling. We need densification. We've got to support, you know, granny suites and take those large buildings and bring them down into smaller units so that we have more affordable energy costs through efficiencies as well. But we have to change things like our zoning. We have to deal with NIMBYism, that we don't want densification. We have to densify. There's no housing across the province. This is not a local issue. This is an issue for the entire province to deal with. We are looking at, and I know the province has put things in place where there is a development that certain portions of the development will be affordable units. The province has invested in the affordable housing that's already being built in our community. There's a lot going on, but we've got to do a lot more. I don't have a magic bullet to this because I've been studying this for 3 or 4 years, trying to figure out how we're going to solve this problem. We're living too much alone. We have to look at, you know, these incredible people that are coming together that are unrelated, and 5 women living in a house in Barrie, and open up the regulations around that so people can co-house and support each other.
So as I said last night, and I'll stick to this all along, the Planning Act is to be a municipal development planning. The province interferes way too much, restricts too much, doesn't allow the municipalities to develop here, develop there, where they need the development. Not only that, the Niagara Escarpment Planning and Development Act, it's a disaster. In 2014, there was a bill presented in the House to repeal the Niagara Escarpment Planning and Development Act to open up the area throughout, and these 3 parties voted that bill down. And that's a disaster for the farmers and for this area all the way through down to Niagara Falls. So this is the whole thing. There are too many pieces of provincial legislation and policy interfering with our municipalities to provide the housing that is needed. And not only that, the province is supposed to fund this and assist. So is the federal government. Where's the money?
This comes down to being an absolute strategic thought process of what your investment's going to be. Where are you going to put your money? Every government collects taxes. Every government has a plan of what they're going to do. Where is the actual strategy and where is the actual priority to make that happen? We need a mixture, I would believe, of public and private and municipal so that everyone's moving in the same direction. We need to be engaging what our demographic is. A lot of people want to be living in more of a hub-like structure, so how can we do that? We need to lower the cost of things like energy so that they're more affordable, and we need to work with the development community to know how to do this. At the end of the day, a lot of people have came to me and said, Bill, particularly with 600 schools being closed, why wouldn't we actually start taking those buildings and repurposing them? Why wouldn't we utilize them for some of the affordable housing? But at the end of the day, I come back to everything is simplistic in my world, that if we continue to spend and overspend, if we had $300 billion, which is what we have in debt, would we have an affordable housing problem? Would we have a school closure problem? Would we have people in hallways if we had that $300 billion in our economy that we were actually spending, not spending on interest?
We definitely need affordable housing, and I would think that none of the parties are going to say, oh, we don't need that. However, if you go and you look up on Google affordable housing and politicians, you will see Peter Tabbins. He's an NDP MPP, and he is at the forefront of making sure, advocating for affordable housing. It is definitely a problem here in Grey Bruce. I know people who looked for housing here in Owen Sound, in Durham, and struggled to find something that they could afford that wasn't a dump. We need to make sure that there are reasonable places to live out there that people can afford. The NDP would invest in repairing current affordable housing that's out there, making sure that there's legislation that was repealed, that all new builds would include some affordable housing. The Liberals have had 15 years to fix it. The NDP and NDP government would fix it and make sure that everyone has somewhere to live that they can afford. Thank you.
So the next question is directed to Bill Walker and is sort of related to this whole housing issue. I'm not sure whether the right verb is being used here. They're saying, would you oppose any changes to Ontario's rent controls? Or would you propose any changes to Ontario's rent controls?
I think with all legislation, our job is to actually set the laws for the province to be the most fair and equitable, to treat everyone the same. So I think everything that's out there, whether it be rent controls, should be reviewed on an annual basis. Much of the legislation that we're reviewing currently at Queen's Park is 30, 40, 50 years old. So something like rent controls, the world changes, our economy changes. I always think you should be looking at it, but you have to look at both sides of the equation. You have to look at who the renter is, and you have to look at the person who owns that piece of property and be fair to both. So I think anything should be able to be reviewed. We can always improve, and certainly at the end of the day, I think that's a good government that actually is taking a look at all policies on a regular basis, making sure that they're current for today and serving the people at all times on both sides of the equation.
And because this question was asked of you, I think each of the other candidates has 60 seconds to respond to that. So
first, I'd like to just say, if someone's a homeowner, they may say, why do I worry about affordable housing or rent control? Many of us have children who are hopefully not living at home forever and are going to probably rent for a while before they buy their own home if they go there. Or seniors often go into a rental home instead of their own home. So this is something that affects all of us, plus it affects our economy. The rent control is a problem. There are loopholes. What happens is the owner can say, oh, I'm going to have my sister move in. You have to move out. And someone moves out, then their sister may or may not actually move in. The next people come in, the rent jumps. So we have some rent control that someone who lives there can't have a sudden jump in rent, but they can be forced out. We need to change that and close the loopholes so that people can have a stable rent. Thank you.
Well, Karen, I'm really happy to tell you that that's already been dealt with. The renovictions, as they were called. Now, if you are evicting somebody because you want to renovate the unit and or you have family members coming in, you have to give back 2 months' worth of rent to make sure to disincentivize, because this housing market is so tight, this constant moving out of people and getting evicted. The rent controls, we made the changes only recently because there was no rent controls on buildings that were 91 or earlier, or older. I keep forgetting which direction I'm going. Younger buildings. There was no rent controls, but that still didn't spur the development and the building of rental units. Everything's been condos, condos, condos. So it's really nice to see that we're getting rental units in our community, even though rent controls are there, to ensure that people understand what their bills are going to be so they can make budgets and that they can afford to live, and so we don't have landlords with a constant turnover of tenants because it's unaffordable.
Well, you know, if the province wasn't involved in market manipulation in real estate, we wouldn't have this problem. Because the province actually is involved with market manipulation, because they're the ones that say where you can or cannot develop. Now, I actually heard Bill Murdoch say the other day, and actually this is a really common sense, reasonable plan. We have the green belts, and everybody beat Doug Ford up for saying he's going to open it up for development. But he was going to take more of our land for recreation and so on and so forth. So the big thing is, in the Greenbelt, there is all kinds of land that is not usable farmland. It's stone, rock, it's worthless. So why aren't they using that and opening that up for development? Because we're going to end up like the Agricultural Land Reserve in British Columbia, where nobody can afford to live. Thank you.
And I think we've been around the circuit okay. Here's a question for everybody. What is your plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and pollution and to mitigate and adapt to climate change? So, who's first here? Because we... Okay, Karen.
Well, either that or Bill.
I'm happy to go.
Okay, Bill, you're on.
Well, we have resources already at our disposal, and what some of you won't know in the crowd, or many of you may not know, is the first thing that the government does today is they actually call Niagara Falls and say, don't capture all of the water today. That's our greenest, freest, cleanest form of power, and we don't maximize it. Then they call up to Bruce Power and they say, just vent some of your power to the atmosphere, but we're going to contractually pay you. So we have the ability right with those two systems. We then brought along the Green Energy Act, which, let's not forget, usurped the rights of the local democratic process. You as a local resident and the local council have no say whether you're going to put in wind turbines in your own backyard. So at the end of the day, there's lots with our existing resources that we can do to actually have a huge impact. We then, if we don't have enough power because of the intermittent sources, do you know what we fire up? We fire up a gas plant. Not certain how good that is for our environment, particularly for the people that are concerned. And let's not forget that the first step was to actually not collect the water that we actually have at our disposal right now. And we're paying $6 billion to the states to get rid of our power, our surplus power, and we're putting up more and more intermittent sources. The day after the $25 billion was borrowed for the Fair Energy Act, more microfit contracts for green energy were actually allotted by the Liberal government. So at the end of the day, there's lots that we can be doing. We can all take our own responsibility. We can all conserve. Francesca, I know, will bring conservation into this, but at the end of the day, the minister in the House every day kept talking about how many more programs there were for people. Why don't we fix the problem rather than taking more of your money to give more surpluses back to the people, subsidies back to the people, if we just fix the problem? And there's lots of opportunity out there with the actual resources we have currently in place.
We definitely have to lower our greenhouse gas emissions. As Henry David Thoreau said, what use is a house if you haven't got a tolerable world to put it on? So we all need to be able to breathe our air. We all need to be able to walk through the trees. We need our environment in order to live. The NDP supports the cap and trade system. So what that is to make sure that there's a cap on the pollution and trading, so that if one produces a little bit more, another can produce less. It only works if the caps are lowered. The other problem is there can be a challenge in rural areas. So the NDP would make sure that it is made more fair so that we in the rural areas are not penalized because we have to use our cars. And it'd be great to have intercity transportation. We need to have transportation between here and Toronto, for example. I'm not sure how viable it will be to go through every back road of all our areas. So we need cars, we need tractors. We need to still do what we can to reduce the greenhouse gas production. Also encourage things like electric cars, and then we can get to the point where we have less greenhouse gases and better air to breathe. Thank you.
So one of the things that I'm really excited about is the natural gas expansion in southern Grey and Bruce counties coming into Kincardine. When you take a farm off of furnace oil and put it onto natural gas, it's a 30% reduction right there in greenhouse gas emissions. We're expanding charging stations, and we need to get one up into Tobermory, so when we have the elite fat cats out of Toronto up here and spending all their money on tourism, that they've got a place to charge their electric cars. You know, we've got a lot of non-emitting energy sources, which are nuclear. We've got our solar, we've got our wind, and that supply mix is really important to stabilize that grid. And we've got to, and that's where we're going with the energy file, to day-ahead markets on buying power that way. So there's a lot happening, and it's all really positive.
A few of you may not know, I actually presented at an environmental review tribunal in regards to the wind turbines in Clearview. And so I presented an 80-page document to the panel, and I explained to them that these green energy projects, particularly the wind projects, are a violation of the Criminal Code of Canada. They are a violation of the Expropriations Act. You see, the Liberals say NIMBYism. But you have rights, and they're violating them with those turbines. You have rights not to have to pay so much for your electricity because of bogus bookkeeping with the Fair Hydro Plan and bogus contracts with Samsung. But the thing that disturbs me the most is every one of these parties received donations from Samsung. So how unfair is that? This is the thing. Not only that, people actually have been killed by ice, fling, shed, and throw from the turbines. They are a criminal negligence, and they harm people. People can't even live in their own homes. And you know what? Germany people can't live in their homes either. So, you know, somebody's got to stand up for the people. Thank you very much.
So here's a question for everybody. Are you going to do anything at all about double, triple, even quadruple taxes that we're being charged, not just on new items, but then even things that are used, examples, cars, trailers, and many other things. Taxes on taxes. Are we going to do anything about this? And we start, Karen, with you.
Speechless. We need to make sure that taxes are implemented fairly. So as I said, we would increase the taxes at the top end. So that's the income taxes on people who are making over $220,000 per year would pay 1% more. Over $300,000 per year would make 2% more. The big corporations can afford to pay a little more of their fair share of taxes. We shouldn't have taxes on necessities. So we keep getting these recessive taxes that are taxing everybody on things like food, things like feminine products. We shouldn't have taxes on books. We should have taxes that are fair at the top end. Thank you.
So I'm going to be really honest and say I don't 100% understand the question and what the convergence there on the taxes are. So if you ask the question, come and explain it to me later. I can tell you that there are systems in place that check this. The utility assistance programs that My United Way and the rest of the ones across the province were initially funded from a class action lawsuit because the companies were charging interest and then they were taxing on the interest, and this went through the court systems and they were told they had to stop doing that, and also then to they were fined a certain amount of money, which became the seed money for these programs. If you've paid tax on one thing once, that should be it. When you go to a yard sale, no one's charging you a provincial sales tax again, and no one's remitting it. So if that's the interesting piece about it all, absolutely, you should not be paying tax on tax.
Well, being a business owner and understanding quite a bit about various different businesses, so when you're in business and you are selling, say, brake fluid, and there's an environmental tax, you are paying the tax on the environmental tax. You're paying the HST on that environmental tax. Every time you fill up at the gas pumps, you are paying tax on tax. Every time you get heating fuel, you are paying tax on tax. You have the carbon tax, you got the road tax, then you have the HST. So now, every time you fill up, you're paying 41 cents for every dollar you pump into your gas tank. And that's tax on tax. Every time you buy some brake fluid, you're paying tax on the environmental tax. Every time you buy that iPod for the disposal, you're paying tax on tax. Somebody's got to get the tax system straightened out, because it's an absolute mess. Thank you.
So it won't come as any surprise that we as Conservatives will say we're going to lower your taxes, and we certainly won't be increasing your taxes. A 12% hydro tax lowering, lower business tax, no taxes for the lowest income earners. And at the end of the day, there's $2 billion more in tax in the 2017-2018 budget that was just passed by the Liberal government. So Francesca, when you said you didn't really understand the tax, I can kind of understand that, because your only real thought process is tax and spend, tax and spend, tax and spend. Your government in my 6.5 years has had record revenues, and yet you've ran a deficit every single year, and you still actually increase taxes. When your government came to office, you said, we will not raise taxes. And what, within a couple of months, did we have? The highest tax ever in our provincial history, the health tax. And the NDP, I think, is a fair state to say you're going to tax and spend even faster, because you were worried the last time about the Liberals taking a bit of the left side. You've actually gone to the other side and saying, we're going to tax and spend even more and run the same deficits. So at the end of the day, folks, we have to all know, well, there's only one taxpayer. And let's not forget about that debt, and think of it this way. Debt is nothing more than a future tax. We will lower your taxes. We will not raise your taxes.
Now, with just about 8 minutes remaining in the program, I think we're going to call on the candidates for their wrap-up statements. They each have 2 minutes to sum up, and we're going to start in reverse order as we began. So, Bill, you're on.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all of the organizers, the moderator, the timekeeper, and anyone involved tonight. And Gary from Fish Finder, good for you on the audio system. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute privilege and honor to have served the great people of Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound over the last 6.5 years. I've dedicated my life for the last 6.5 years to this job, and I want to continue to do that. I want to extend a sincere thank you to my wife, Michaela, and my son, Zach and Ben, because they are truly the people that I do this for and are there for me every single day, and I can rest assured I don't see them a whole lot because I am so dedicated to my job. I believe I bring passion to the job, I bring energy, I bring integrity, I bring trust, and I bring something that actually was shared to me in the last couple of weeks by both members of actually the Liberal Party and the NDP, longtime members who said, Bill, you're doing a great job. You actually represent our area in a really, really respectful way, and we appreciate what you do. And to them, I say thank you, because that's what I do for all parties and everyone out there. When I'm elected, I forget the partisanship. Yes, we have a job to do, and yes, we're going to see things from different eyes, but we are there at the end of the day to make this province, and particularly Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound, a better place. I'm proud to say that I've worked hard in the Markdale Hospital. I've worked against school closures. I'm working on Grey Gables and a number of other multiple things in between. I want to be your local representative. At the end of the day, most of the people in Bruce Grey for history have always looked and said, who's the person who's going to represent our area the best? Forget partisan stuff. Let's say who's going to get out there and do the work and truly put their heart and soul into the job. I pledge to do that. I respectfully ask you for your vote on June the 7th. Thank you so much.
You know, a very wise man once said, don't vote for the party, vote for the person.
Other than Bill.
There's one problem. When you vote for one of these persons, you are voting for the party. So you're all going to have the debt under the fire hydro plan. You aren't going to have anyone in Queen's Park standing up for your constitutional rights, because I don't think they know them, because last November they all voted in favor of removing your constitutional rights in regards to warrantless entry. I would not allow that to happen if I possibly could. I would take on the auditor, the Attorney General, and explain how that violates your rights. They cannot do that because of the whip vote. They must vote the party line. And that is wrong, because that is not representing you, the people. And this is what I am bringing to the table. Someone who understands the Constitution, understands your rights, and works, who is up at 3:30, 4 o'clock every morning reading legislation. That's what I do. Read legislation, legislative debates, so I know what's going on in government. So I would really, truly love and hope that on June 7th, you look for something different and something way better, something unusual and truly honest with integrity, who wants to help you make this a better riding for this province. Thank you.
So thank you to all of you who came today. Participating in a democracy, it has to be a competition because it matters so much. When I drive the rural routes of our community and I see the fields, I see the people, and I talk to the people, that's what matters to me. My life has been, and my career has always been, in community service, running things like tourism for municipalities, running a United Way, and dealing with the people. And I just really feel very strongly that we need to give voice to those who do not have a voice in our community, so that a rising tide does lift all boats, and that everybody can be prosperous in our community. We have the capacity for that. We have the compassion for that. We have the opportunity for that. So I'm asking for your support to send me, someone who really has already made change at Queen's Park, to bring change to our community, to bring the voice of rural to Queen's Park. So I'm asking for your support and your vote on June 7th.
Yep,
June 7th. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the organizers. I'd also like to thank you for your attention. Please encourage all of your friends to vote, hopefully for me, but definitely to get out there and vote and have your say. Bill may bring a lot to this. One thing he does not bring is a plan. The Liberals have had 15 years to fix things. They've done some half measures in the past year, but they proposed a budget that has huge costs. Only the NDP has a plan that will help us, will not drive the debt higher and higher and can make our lives better for everybody. Our plan includes pharmacare. That's a drug plan for everybody. It includes dental care. The number of people have said to me, oh my goodness, that is such a great idea to have dental care for all of Ontarians. We really need that. That will save people from going to the hospital. It'll save money and save people pain. Such a great idea. We're the only party that is going to lower hydro rates, not by playing a shell game, but by buying back Hydro One, putting it in public hands so we can have control over our own service that we need. We all need electricity. We need to be able to have control of it. We will make post-secondary schools more affordable. We will invest in affordable housing. We will implement a ministry of mental health and addictions. That's another thing that's come up. It didn't come up tonight in the questions. I'm a little surprised because it's come up to me a number of times. We are the only party that will invest in our future, and we can have change for the better with an NDP government.
This concludes tonight's all-candidate meeting. The Owen Sound and District Chamber of Commerce thanks our candidates for their time tonight to help inform the electorate of their positions on the issues in the June 7th provincial election. Thanks to everyone in our audience, and I want to thank you for excellent questions and for such respectful treatment of our excellent candidates. I think we've gotten to know them all better, and it's been a very, very productive evening. Thanks also to those who will be watching the televised program. And I just wanted to mention, if I can find my note, it's on tomorrow night on Rogers at 7 p.m., Thursday afternoon at 4 p.m., Saturday, May 19th at 8 a.m., and Sunday, May 20th at 4 p.m. Those are just some of the times. It'll be repeated often. So I just want to say in conclusion, a very high price has been paid for the privileges we enjoy as Canadians in 2018. Please be sure you cast your ballot. Thank you.
Due to the length of the preceding program, we now join the regularly scheduled program already in progress.
Yeah, so that's a landmark in town. So you have been owner-operator of this business for just how long?
A week and a half now.
A week and a half, so you're new to this. You're quite young. What got you involved or interested in wanting to be a business owner, especially in something like this?
Well, I've liked the concept of escape rooms, so I've tried them in Canada and the States, so I thought, just why not?
Yeah. Now, before we started the show, I had a chance to tour some of the rooms, and it really is quite interesting. The concept of escape rooms, for any one of our viewers that doesn't know what they are, involves puzzles and solving a puzzle and then moving sometimes from one room to the next, and sometimes just staying in the one room. So can you tell us a little bit about more about that?
So when you get in the room, there's a few puzzles that you need to solve. When solving those puzzles, they'll get you onto the next puzzle. So usually a puzzle is either a word or a 4-digit combination. Some are even larger than 4 digits.
And so once you solve that, then you get into perhaps the next, like it might be a briefcase or whatever that has another clue. Yeah. And then you work your way up into perhaps another room, or you finally get the treasure or whatever it is that you're looking for. Yeah. So how many rooms do you have operational right now that include escapes?
I have 2 rooms, so Double Crossed and the Abandoned Game Room.
Double Crossed? What's that one about?
That one is, so you and your partner have been on a string of successful robberies.
Hear that, Darlene? Successful robberies.
So word on the street is that he's about to skip town. So you're going to break into his apartment and steal the money.
Oh, okay. So that one's good. And then you have another one called?
The Abandoned Game Room.
The Abandoned Game Room. Tell us what that's about.
So I don't have a backstory for that.
You don't have a backstory, but what's involved in that? What do you have to do?
So there's like cards and I guess anything you'd find in a game room.
Yeah, I took a look at that one. That one looks pretty interesting too. So you've had some help, I'm sure, getting involved and getting started. Where did you get, you need money, you need startup funding to open any business. So how did you go about when you're only 16 getting all this together?
I applied for a student grant from the government, so I received that through the Owen Sound Business Center. And then my dad also helps me finance the business.
Well, yeah, you can always count on support from family. And does your dad help you with the day-to-day operation of the business?
Yeah, he comes in sometimes and helps me operate and set stuff up.
Good. So you had the center set up here. So can you tell us a little bit about how people would find your business online and how they would book a room if they want to?
So either they can find my business through Facebook or on the website, and they can also book through either of those websites.
Okay, so the business is called Insidious Escape. So how do you spell that?
Assiduous.
So it's Assiduous Escape. What does assiduous mean?
It means in constant effort to complete something.
Okay, and I can see where that ties in with the puzzle pieces and trying to go from room to room. Okay, so they can book online, they can call,
yep.
and that's how they get a room.